Have you ever wondered, what if everything you've been taught about life, purpose, and success is completely backwards? I mean, really think about it. From the moment we're born, we're thrown onto a treadmill of expectations. We're told to crawl, then walk, then run, to study hard, get good grades, find a career path, build a résumé, check the boxes, move up, hustle harder, win, excel, conquer, optimize, outperform. The world keeps whispering or sometimes screaming, find your purpose. Live with a goal. Be someone. Become something. But what if that's not it? What if chasing purpose is the very thing that makes life feel hollow? What if constantly striving to become something pulls us away from what we already are? In this video, we're going to explore a deeply radical idea, not just as philosophy, but as an invitation to live differently. What if a life without purpose is not meaningless, but deeply meaningful? We'll walk through the teachings of one of the most mind-bending philosophers of the 20th century, Alan Watts, a man who dared to say, you don't have to have a purpose to justify your existence. You just have to exist. And if that sounds reckless, or lazy, or even dangerous, stay with me. Because what you're about to discover may unearth something you've always known. But we're never allowed to believe that life is not a task to complete, a game to win, or a script to follow. It is like music, something to be played. We'll explore how letting go of the obsession with purpose can open the door to something far richer: presence, wonder, creativity, freedom. We'll see how purposelessness is not the end of ambition, it's the birth of true alignment. We'll unpack how the most beautiful parts of life, love, music, laughter, nature, poetry, are all completely and gloriously pointless. So if you've ever felt burned out chasing goals you didn't set, or felt like you're sprinting toward a finish line you're not even sure you believe in, this video is for you. If you've ever caught yourself staring out a window and thinking, there must be more to this than climbing ladders and checking boxes, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not lost. You might just be waking up. And if at any point in this video something resonates with you, if it stirs a question, a spark, or a sense of peace, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Also, if you'd like to support this channel and help us create more content like this, you can tap the super thanks button down below. Every donation, big or small, helps fuel this journey of thought, feeling, and freedom. Now take a breath. Loosen your grip on the map you've been given, and let's step into a different way of seeing. Because sometimes the most meaningful life begins when you stop trying to make it meaningful. Let's begin. Alan Watts opens with a provocative proposition. Either you trust nature, or you attempt to control it, and in that choice lies the blueprint for how you live. This framing is deceptively simple, yet the implications are vast. Trusting nature doesn't just mean admiring sunsets or walking barefoot in a park. It means accepting, even embracing, that life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes painful. It means letting go of the illusion that everything can be explained, predicted, and managed. Watts contrasts this worldview with one driven by mistrust, which leads to a society obsessed with regulation, surveillance, and control, what he likens to George Orwell's 1984. And indeed, he's not exaggerating. Today, we live in a world where algorithms can predict our next purchase, where every click and swipe is recorded, and where entire infrastructures are built around managing risk and minimizing uncertainty. From surveillance cameras on street corners to facial recognition in airports, our societies reflect a deep fear of unpredictability and unwillingness to let nature and human nature be. But here's the question. Has this control made us feel safer, or more human, or more alive? That's the paradox Watts is pointing at. The more we try to engineer every aspect of life, the less life seems to retain its organic essence. It becomes sterilized, managed, and ultimately hollow. This doesn't just apply to governments or institutions, it seeps into our personal lives. Think about how we manage relationships today. Dating apps give us algorithms to find the perfect match. But in doing so, They strip away the mystery and serendipity of falling in love. Friendships are curated through feeds and likes. Even emotions are increasingly pathologized. Anxiety must be diagnosed. Sadness must be treated. There's little space left to simply feel. What Watts suggests is radically different. He asks us to surrender not in defeat, but in trust. Trust in a natural rhythm of things. Trust that life, while unpredictable, is not inherently hostile. This kind of trust isn't blind, it's courageous. It means accepting that sometimes things will fall apart, that not every plan will work out, and that people, including ourselves, will be flawed. One of the most relatable metaphors Watts uses is that of a society where everyone becomes a policeman to everyone else. It echoes what we now see in cancel culture or social media outrage, where a misstep, even an accidental one, can lead to public condemnation. The lines between accountability and policing blur. This culture of hypervigilance creates pressure to curate every thought, every post, every statement. In such an environment, authenticity suffocates. Now, take this to a more personal level. Imagine someone who doesn't trust themselves. They question every decision, overanalyze every emotion, second-guess their impulses. This person may seem responsible, even cautious, but they're deeply unfree. They live within a psychological surveillance state of their own making. Their mind is the big brother, constantly watching, judging, restricting. And when that mistrust becomes chronic, it manifests in anxiety, depression, and a deep existential fatigue. Contrast that with someone who allows themselves to act without overthinking, who trusts their instincts, their creativity, their timing. This isn't recklessness, it's alignment. It's the jazz musician improvising on stage, the athlete moving in flow, the coder writing elegant functions not because they follow a spec, but because they feel the logic. This is trust in action. This is faith not in the religious sense, but as a willingness to engage with the unknown without needing to dominate it. Watts' point becomes even clearer when we examine modern systems. In the workplace, micromanagement is a form of mistrust. Managers who can't let go of control create rigid environments where innovation dies. In education, standardization replaces curiosity. Students are taught to pass tests, not to explore. Bureaucracy grows, and, as Watts says, it becomes more important to record what happens than to let it happen. Even in software development, which I'm intimately familiar with, they reduce human creativity to a spreadsheet. Developers begin to optimize for the system, not for the user. When this happens, brilliant engineers start to burn out not because they're weak, but because the system no longer trusts them to be human. And that's the crux of Watts' message. Without trust in nature, in people, in ourselves, we build prisons. Elegant, rational, well-intentioned prisons. And once built, they're incredibly hard to escape. But they begin, always, with fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of being wrong. Yet what if uncertainty isn't a flaw in the system, but the system itself? What if unpredictability is not chaos, but potential? This reframing is not just philosophical, it's deeply practical. Think about parenting. The instinct to protect a child is natural and noble. But if taken too far, it becomes controlling. Helicopter parenting, for example, can stunt a child's development, making them fearful and dependent. Ironically, by trying to eliminate all danger, we eliminate the child's ability to grow resilient. In politics, similar patterns emerge. Authoritarian regimes often rise from a promise to restore order, to protect people from threats, real or imagined. But the price is always the same: personal freedom, autonomy, the right to make mistakes. Watts would argue that these regimes, like overly strict parents, don't solve the problem, they become the problem. Even in health, we see this. The obsession with quantifying wellness, calories tracked, steps counted, sleep analyzed, can become self-defeating. Instead of listening to our bodies, we listen to our devices. Instead of eating because we're hungry, we eat because the app says it's time. In chasing optimization, we lose intuition. What invites us to do is radical by today's standards. Your life can be beautiful even if it leads nowhere in particular. This kind of trust isn't easy. It goes against decades of cultural programming. We've been taught that productivity equals worth, that control equals safety, that structure equals morality. Watts undermines all of that with a single idea: let go. But letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means loosening the grip just enough to allow life to breathe. It means leaving space for surprise, for play, for grace. It means acknowledging that the most important things, love, art, wonder, cannot be planned. It also means forgiving yourself. If you can't trust yourself, you'll never trust the world. But self-trust isn't arrogance. It's the quiet confidence that you can respond to whatever life throws at you. It's the understanding that perfection isn't the goal, presence is. In the end, Alan Watts' vision is not utopian, it's human. He knows that life will disappoint us, that nature can be cruel, that people can fail. But he also knows that trying to eliminate all those risks also eliminates the joy, the beauty, the spontaneity of existence. So he asks us, do you want to live in a world that is safe, predictable, and dead, or one that is alive, chaotic, and real? Most people never get to make that choice consciously. They're too busy chasing goals they didn't choose, living by rules they didn't write, and fearing outcomes that may never come. But you, reading this now, have the chance to pause, to breathe, to consider that maybe, just maybe, life isn't something to control. It's something to trust. And from that trust, everything else flows. Alan Watts' critique of modern society strikes at the heart of a deep and growing dysfunction: our obsession with appearances, documentation, and systems over the actual substance of life. In his lecture, he uses the example of universities, where the registrar's records are locked in safes and guarded, while the library, the very soul of academic exploration, can be neglected. This isn't just a quirky complaint about university administration. It's a metaphor for a broader phenomenon where form has overtaken function and appearance is valued over authenticity. This tendency toward excessive formalism is everywhere. In education, students are driven by grades rather than learning. Teachers are forced to teach to the test, narrowing the curriculum to what's measurable instead of what's meaningful. Creativity, critical thinking, and curiosity, the actual purpose of education, are sacrificed on the altar of bureaucratic order. The result is that schools become factories, not of knowledge, but of conformity. Watts saw this as symptomatic of a deeper sickness: the belief that reality can be adequately captured by records, data, and procedures. The irony, of course, is that in trying to measure and document everything, we often lose touch with the very essence of what we're supposed to be measuring. For example, in healthcare, the patient's chart can become more important than the patient themselves. Doctors and nurses spend more time entering data into electronic systems than they do making eye contact with the people they're supposed to help. Nowhere is this clearer than in modern workplaces. In many large organizations, employees spend their days preparing slide decks, filling out status reports, and attending endless meetings that produce little of value. Developers, in particular, often find themselves churning out Jira tickets and project updates rather than writing actual code. When productivity becomes more about looking busy than being productive, we've entered a Kafkaesque world of performative labor. This isn't just inefficient, it's soul-crushing. People enter creative professions, education, medicine, software engineering because they want to solve problems, help others, or build something meaningful. But bureaucracy hijacks that impulse. It replaces intrinsic motivation with extrinsic metrics. It replaces craftsmanship with compliance. We see this dynamic in the obsession with key performance indicators, KPIs, in every industry. On paper, KPIs seem logical. You want to measure performance, right? But when people are judged solely by those metrics, they begin optimizing for the metric instead of the mission. A teacher teaches for test scores. A developer writes code that looks efficient in ticket systems, but might be fragile or unreadable. A doctor focuses on reducing wait times rather than improving care. This is known as Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Watt's example of universities illustrates how this dynamic rots institutions from the inside. Administration becomes more powerful than the faculty, not because administrators teach or research better, but because they control the rules, the budgets, and the records. Faculty, who are supposed to be the heart of the institution, get bogged down in bureaucratic tasks. They attend meetings, navigate compliance requirements, and fill out forms, all of which takes time away from teaching and research. The institution's stated mission, educating students, advancing knowledge, gets sidelined. And yet, from the outside, everything looks fine. The records are clean. The files are in order. The accreditation is intact. But the spirit is gone. It's like tending to the frame of a house while the foundation cracks. Eventually, the whole thing collapses not with a bang, but with a slow, invisible erosion of meaning. This problem isn't limited to academia. It plays out in every system where bureaucracy grows unchecked. Consider law enforcement. Officers spend more time doing paperwork than patrolling communities. Cases get delayed not because of lack of evidence, but because of procedural missteps. Justice becomes a function of form, not truth. Even in relationships, the impulse toward formalism shows up. Think about how dating has evolved. There are now apps with swipe logic compatibility scores, even AI chatbots to help you craft the perfect first message. It's all very neat and optimized, but is it love? Or is it a simulation of connection designed to satisfy metrics and filters? Watts would likely argue that these trends reflect a loss of trust in the organic messiness of life. Bureaucracy is born from fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of disorder, fear of ambiguity. But in trying to eliminate those fears, we eliminate life itself. Life is messy. Learning is nonlinear. Relationships are unpredictable. Creativity defies spreadsheets. To reduce these things to systems is to misunderstand them fundamentally. There's also a darker implication. Systems of control often serve power more than purpose. In a bureaucracy, those who control the process control the outcome. That's why administrative bloat grows even in failing institutions. People don't climb hierarchies by doing better work, they climb by mastering the system. They become fluent in compliance, not excellence. This is particularly evident in politics. Politicians focus on polls, optics, and strategic messaging rather than solving actual problems. Policy is written in legalese that no citizen can understand. Public debate is reduced to sound bites and media cycles. And yet, despite all the noise, nothing seems to change. The machinery runs, but it produces nothing of substance. It is activity without productivity. What's deeper insight is that this obsession with form is not just external, it's psychological. Many people organize their entire lives like a filing cabinet. They plan, schedule, track, optimize, hoping that if everything is orderly, life will make sense. But life doesn't care about your calendar. It unfolds in real time, often inconveniently. And if you're too focused on managing it, you miss it. This becomes tragically clear at the end of life. People who have played by the rules, who have done everything right, often look back with regret, not because they failed, but because they never truly lived. They never let go of the structure long enough to feel something raw, or take a risk, or follow a passion that couldn't be justified. In a corporate context, it's easy to identify. The employee who clocks in on time, never rocks the boat, never takes initiative, perfect on paper, invisible in practice. The organization may reward this person, but it doesn't grow because of them. Growth comes from people who question assumptions, who color outside the lines, who break the rules when the rules are wrong. Yet those are the very people bureaucracy punishes. Innovation threatens systems. Creativity disrupts order. That's why artists rebels, and visionaries often find themselves at odds with institutions. They don't fit into the forms. And rather than adapt the forms, institutions try to force them to conform. But as Watts would remind us, life cannot be domesticated. It is not a document to be filed. It is a living, breathing, evolving thing. And to honor it, we must be willing to let go of the need to control it. This doesn't mean we abandon all structure. Structure can support freedom, but only when it serves life, not the other way around. The question is always, does this process help people flourish, or does it merely preserve the illusion of control? In practical terms, this means questioning the rituals of your own life. Are your meetings necessary? Are your reports meaningful? Are your habits alive, or just automated? Are you doing things because they work, or because that's the way they've always been done? It also means having the courage to prioritize people over processes. In a hospital, that might mean making eye contact with a patient instead of filling out a form. In a classroom, it might mean veering off syllabus to follow a student's curiosity. In a company, it might mean letting a team experiment without demanding a business case first. These choices are small, but they matter because over time, they shape the culture. And culture is what determines whether an institution is alive or dead. Watt's warning is clear. When a map becomes more important than the territory, we get lost. When a symbol replaces the substance, we become hollow. When a scorecard matters more than the game, we stop playing. But it's not too late to reverse course. The antidote to bureaucracy isn't chaos, it's trust. Trust in people. Trust in intuition. Trust that not everything needs to be proven to be valuable. That not everything needs a purpose to be beautiful. Ultimately, Watts isn't just talking about paperwork or university policy. He's talking about a way of being. One that prioritizes experience over evidence, presence over procedure, and meaning over metrics. One that says, maybe life isn't something to organize, but something to live. Alan Watts brings attention to an idea that, at first glance, seems almost subversive in today's productivity-driven culture. True scholarship, at its root, is leisure. The word scholar, he reminds us, originates from the Greek skol, meaning leisure time unburdened by necessity, obligation, or urgency. This etymological insight reframes the way we think about learning and academic pursuits. Watts isn't being nostalgic for some bygone era of aristocratic education. He's making a philosophical argument that learning, when it is genuine, comes from a place of curiosity, not compulsion from desire, not duty. In our current world, however, leisure has been downgraded. It's no longer seen as essential, but as a luxury, or worse, laziness. We structure education to meet job market demands, not to explore human potential. Students are conditioned to think of learning as a transaction. You study hard, you pass exams, you earn a credential, you get a job. Knowledge is framed as capital, and school becomes the factory that manufactures it. This economic metaphor is everywhere. Universities are evaluated based on graduate employment rates, not philosophical depth. Departments that produce useful knowledge STEM, business, law get funding, while those that focus on literature, history, or the arts are deemed soft or irrelevant. The purpose of education is no longer to produce well-rounded, thoughtful, and imaginative citizens. It is to produce employable individuals. It is no coincidence that in many American high schools, arts programs are the first to face budget cuts. After all, when every hour must be justified in terms of utility, activities like painting or poetry don't seem to make the cut. Watts' critique hits hard here because he exposes the fallacy at the heart of this worldview. If learning only exists to support work, then learning itself becomes work. And if play exists only to recharge us for more work, then it, too, becomes a form of labor. The boundaries blur until everything is just a means to some economic end. Under this regime, even rest is expected to be productive. We meditate so we can focus better at the office. We read so we can impress others. We hack our habits, our bodies, our sleep-seeking efficiencies in realms that used to be sacred. Watts warns that once play is instrumentalized, it ceases to be play. Imagine a child who only plays because they're told it will help them focus better in school. That's not play. That's strategy. The joy, spontaneity, and discovery vanish. The same applies to adults. When we pursue hobbies solely because they'll look good on resumes or help us network, we aren't engaging with life, we're managing it. This mindset infiltrates every layer of modern life. Consider how we consume art. Rarely do we sit with a poem simply to be moved by its rhythm or mystery. We dissect it, analyze it, explain it, package it. Or consider the rise of productive leisure. Apps that track your reading speed, fitness watches that reward you for every step, language learning platforms that gamify fluency. There's nothing wrong with these tools per se, but when their use becomes compulsive, when the underlying goal is performance rather than presence, we lose something vital. Watts invites us to return to a different relationship with knowledge, one that is playful, exploratory, open-ended. He believes that to be a scholar in the truest sense is to study what is not necessary for survival. That is, to engage in pursuits that don't directly result in material gain, but enrich life with nuance, beauty, and joy. This isn't about rejecting utility altogether. It's about resisting the reduction of all value to utility. Take the act of reading a novel. You're not going to get a raise for finishing Dostoevsky, but your soul might be stirred, your moral compass challenged, your empathy deepened. That's not nothing. In fact, it may be more valuable than any technical skill you pick up in a webinar. Or think of listening to a jazz musician riff on a melody, improvising not to impress, but to explore. There's no purpose beyond the moment itself. And yet, those moments stay with us. They remind us of what it means to be human. We all have personal stories that illustrate this. For me, I discovered the power of purposeless learning when I began to explore digital painting. There was no reason, no client, no deadline, no profit to be made. But the more I played with color, texture, and composition, the more I realized how deeply it sharpened my eye for design, how it refreshed my thinking, and how it gave me peace. Later, I noticed the same phenomenon in programming. What's point here is that leisure isn't idleness. It's not doing nothing. It's doing something for its own sake. It's a state of mind, a posture of openness. The danger of our age is that we've confused leisure with waste and utility with virtue. As a result, we've become hyper-efficient machines that can no longer pause, reflect, or savor. Let's take the example of Google's famous 20% time policy, which allowed employees to spend 1/5 of their time working on projects of their own choosing. Some of Google's most successful innovations, Gmail, AdSense, came from that unproductive time. Why? Because people work better when they're free to explore. But that freedom can't be faked. You can't schedule serendipity. It only arises in conditions of trust and spaciousness. Academic institutions, in particular, would do well to heed this. Instead of turning every research grant into a business proposal or every seminar into a deliverable, they could protect spaces for wonder. Let a philosopher think for years without publishing. Let a poet teach without standardizing. Let students follow questions that may lead nowhere but deeper into themselves. That's not inefficient. That's education. And we need this now more than ever. In a world increasingly dominated by automation, the uniquely human capacities, empathy, imagination, ethical reasoning will be our greatest assets. But these aren't trained through metrics. They're cultivated through stories, dialogue, contemplation, and art. These are the fruits of leisure. Watts also reminds us that the very word school comes from the same root. School was meant to be a sanctuary from necessity, a place to be slow, to think freely. But now, schools often resemble corporations with schedules, quotas, and performance reviews. We tell kids that playtime is earned, not essential. We send them to test prep before they've learned to dream. The irony is that the most powerful innovations in history often came from people playing around. Newton discovered the laws of motion not in a lab, but under an apple tree. Einstein came up with the theory of relativity while daydreaming about riding a beam of light. These weren't scheduled breakthroughs. They were accidents of leisure. If we want to cultivate a culture that values depth over speed, wisdom over output, we need to protect the space to waste time. That means reimagining productivity, not as the ability to produce more, but as the ability to produce meaning. It means redefining success not as constant motion, but as graceful presence. Watt's wisdom here is timeless. If we live only to be useful, we become used. But if we make space for joy, curiosity, and play, we become alive. This is not a call to quit your job or abandon responsibility. It's a call to remember that the point of all this, the emails, the meetings, the goals, is not to win the game, but to enjoy playing it. It's to find moments, however small, where you can do something just because it delights you. Because in those moments, you aren't a cog in a machine. You're a human being, alive and free. And maybe that everything must have a purpose to be meaningful. In the West, purpose is synonymous with value. We grow up believing that our lives must be driven by goals, that our actions must be justified by outcomes, and that time is only well spent if it produces something. But Watts invites us to consider an idea drawn from Eastern philosophy, particularly Taoism and Zen Buddhism, the radical and liberating concept of purposelessness. Purposelessness, as Watts explains it, is not laziness or nihilism. It is not about drifting aimlessly or rejecting responsibility. It's about learning to engage with life without demanding a return. It's about doing things for their own sake, not as a means to an end. And in this way, purposelessness becomes a path to freedom, because only when we are no longer slaves to outcome do we begin to truly live. Nature, Watts observes, is the ultimate example. The waves of the ocean roll in and out without any destination. Trees grow without ambition. Birds sing not because they're auditioning for a forest opera, but simply because they sing. To the modern Western mind, this may seem inefficient or meaningless, but to the Zen mind, it's perfection. Nature is complete in itself. It doesn't need a reason. It just is. And from that being, from that unforced rhythm, arises a kind of peace and beauty that can never be manufactured through willpower or planning. We experience this ourselves in moments when we forget about progress and goals. Think about taking a walk with no destination in mind. Not to burn calories. Not to take photos for Instagram. Not even to think through a problem. Just to walk. You move at your own pace. Maybe swinging a stick at tree branches or watching clouds shift above your head. That moment, as simple as it is, becomes sacred. You are present. You're not performing. Watching autumn leaves drift through the air. Hearing a train whistle echo in the distance. Seeing the moon rise behind the trees. These are experiences that have no function and no utility. We're taught to set goals, chase dreams, compete, measure, improve. School is less about learning than it is about credentials. Even hobbies are often monetized or turned into side hustles. We work out not because it feels good, but because we want to sculpt our bodies. We learn languages to get ahead in our careers. We even meditate to boost productivity. Everything, somehow, becomes instrumental. In this environment, purposelessness sounds like failure. But Watts flips this completely. He argues that the need for purpose is itself a form of anxiety, a refusal to trust life as it is. The idea that we must constantly prove our existence through achievement reveals a fundamental insecurity. What if, instead, we accepted that life needs no justification? What if we could simply be? Think about music. If the goal of a symphony were merely to get to the final note, the fastest conductor would be the best one. But that's absurd. The value of music is not in its ending, but in every note along the way. We don't listen to music to arrive somewhere, we listen because the music itself is the destination. Dancing is the same. We don't dance to reach a particular spot on the floor. We dance to dance. This metaphor applies directly to life. If we live only to reach goals, to make money, to win approval, to retire comfortably, then we are not really living. We are enduring. We are treating life as a waiting room, not a playground. Watts would say, how do we build civilizations, create technology, cure diseases, write books? Isn't purpose necessary for achievement? Watts wouldn't deny that goals have a role, but he would say that when goals become obsessive, when every action must serve a purpose, we lose our humanity. It's possible to work towards something while still maintaining an inner freedom, a sense of play, a lightness of being. One clear example of this is in creative work. Artists, writers, musicians often describe being in the zone, where they lose track of time, where the boundaries between themselves and their craft disappear. This state, called flow, is entirely purposeless in the moment. The artist isn't thinking about deadlines or sales or critics. They're simply immersed in the act of creation. And ironically, this is often when their best work emerges. Because they're not trying to impress anyone. They're not calculating. They're just being. Another example is childhood. Kids are masters of purposelessness. They build sandcastles knowing the tide will wash them away. They draw pictures without caring if they're good. They run in circles for no reason at all. And they're joyful not because they've achieved anything, but because they're alive. Somewhere along the way, we unlearn this. We replace wonder with worry, exploration with efficiency. What calls us back to that original innocence, not in a naive way, but in a wise way. Consider sports. Yes, there are winners and losers, and some games have high stakes. But why do so many people play recreational sports, even when there's no prize? Why do people hike, surf, garden, cook, sing in the shower? Because the act itself is the reward. Because it feels good. Because it connects us to something deeper. Because in those moments, we are not striving, we are being. This mindset also changes how we relate to others. In a purpose-driven world, relationships become transactions. We network instead of a friend. We build connections for career gain. We date with criteria and spreadsheets. But when we let go of agendas, something different happens. We meet people as they are, not as tools for our own advancement. We laugh more. We listen better. We love without bargaining. That too is purposelessness. And it's what makes relationships meaningful. Even nature operates on this principle. Think of a flower blooming in a forest where no one sees it. Is it wasted? Is its beauty pointless? What would say? No, its very lack of purpose is what makes it real. It doesn't need an audience. It just blooms. That's what life does. The fear, of course, is that without purpose, we'll become lazy or directionless. But that fear is based on a misunderstanding. Purpose isn't the only engine of action. Joy is powerful. Curiosity is powerful. Love is powerful. People can work incredibly hard, not because they must, but because they want to. The best teachers teach because they love it. The best scientists experiment because they're curious. None of these things will make you money. None will boost your resume. But they matter. They root you in the present. They remind you that life is not a task list to complete, but a mystery to experience. In this way, purposelessness is not the absence of meaning, it's the presence of freedom. It's the capacity to engage with life without needing to dominate it. It's the recognition that not everything needs to be explained, monetized, or turned into content. Some things just are, and that is enough. What isn't suggesting we abandon structure or give up on ambition. He's suggesting we hold those things more lightly, that we create space for the unscheduled, the spontaneous, the beautiful, that we resist the urge to quantify everything. That we trust the process more than the product. In the end, purposelessness isn't a rejection of purpose. It's a refusal to let purpose rule everything. It's a reminder that the best parts of life often come unannounced, unplanned, and unearned. They come in quiet walks and belly laughs. In unstructured time, they come when we're not trying to get anywhere, but are simply here. And maybe in a world that constantly demands more and more output, more goals, more hustle, what we need most is to remember how to be still, how to enjoy something without needing to explain it, how to trust life like the waves trust the shore, how to live without always asking why. Because sometimes the most meaningful thing you can do is to stop trying to be meaningful and just be. Alan Watts often returned to the metaphor of letting go as central to the experience of being alive. One of his most vivid images is the simple act of throwing an ashtray. You can't throw it unless you let go. As absurd as that may sound out of context, it's a profoundly accurate model for how most people live, gripping tightly to control, to plans, to fear, to identity, without realizing that true motion, true expression, and true living can only happen when we release that grip. Just like you cannot throw an object without letting it leave your hand, you cannot move freely through life while clinging to control. In Western culture, we're taught early on that control is synonymous with competence. Control your time, your emotions, your career, your relationships. Plan meticulously. Forecast every outcome. Avoid chaos. These lessons are reinforced in schools, families, and especially in corporate environments. The problem, as what saw it, is that this obsession with control becomes a kind of self-imposed prison. What starts as a mechanism for safety quickly becomes the very thing that robs us of vitality and spontaneity. To let go, then, is not a reckless act, it's a brave one. It means choosing trust over paranoia, intuition over micromanagement, presence over perfection. It means allowing yourself to act, to create, to love, even when the outcome is uncertain. Let's believe that real life doesn't happen when you've engineered every variable. It happens in the spaces between plans, in the surprises, in the moments where you simply act without overthinking. We can see the consequences of over-control everywhere, but nowhere more clearly than in leadership and management. In my own experience, when I began managing a team of developers, I made the classic mistake of clamping down too hard. I reviewed every pull request with a fine-toothed comb, tracked time obsessively. Every decision had to be approved. Every deviation from the plan was considered a problem. We hit our targets, yes, but we lost the spark. It wasn't until I deliberately pulled back, until I let go of the illusion that I needed to control every variable, that things changed. I started focusing on goals and principles, not on tasks and rules. I gave the team room to experiment, to fail, to try new approaches. And almost instantly morale improved. Innovation returned. People began to take ownership because they finally had the space to do so. The code got better. The culture got better. Not because I was doing less, but because I was doing it with more trust. What would argue that this lesson extends far beyond team dynamics. It's about how we live, how we love, how we grow. The need for control is born from the fear that if we don't manage every detail, things will fall apart. But that fear is rooted in an illusion, that we're capable of managing everything, that chaos is inherently bad, and that we must always be on guard. In reality, most of what we value in life, love, creativity, joy, connection emerges not from control, but from surrender. Take relationships, for example. Many people try to control their partners, not out of malice, but out of fear. They want reassurance. They want predictability. But the more they grip, the more the relationship strains. Real intimacy can only exist where there is freedom. When someone chooses you, not because they have to, but because they want it, that's love. When someone creates something, not because it fits a market need, but because it flows from their soul, that's art. And when someone lives their life, not according to a script, but with courage and presence, that's freedom. Letting go doesn't mean becoming passive. It's not about giving up or resigning. It means acting without attachment to outcome. It's doing your best, then stepping back. It's speaking your truth, then releasing the need for approval. It's creating, building, leading, loving, and then letting life take its course. This principle is especially visible in parenting. The instinct to protect and guide is natural. But helicopter parenting, where every aspect of a child's life is monitored and engineered, often backfires. Children raised in such environments struggle with independence, resilience, and self-trust. They're so used to being managed that they can't navigate ambiguity. The paradox is that to raise strong kids, you have to let them fall. To teach responsibility, you have to relinquish some control. What's it say? You have to let go. The same applies to our inner lives. Many people try to control their thoughts and emotions with military precision. They monitor their feelings. suppress their impulses, second-guess their desires. They're constantly trying to optimize themselves, as if they are a startup, always iterating. But self-improvement taken to an extreme becomes self-rejection. You can't truly grow if you're always rejecting who you are now. Growth comes when you accept where you are, let go of the timeline, and allow yourself to evolve naturally. Watt's teachings also resonate in spiritual practice. In many religious and spiritual traditions, surrender is a central theme. In Christianity, it's let go and let God. In Buddhism, it's non-attachment. In Taoism, it's wu-wei effortless action. The idea is consistent. The more you resist life, the more it resists you. The more you try to force clarity, the more confused you become. The more you chase happiness, the more it eludes you. But when you let go, when you stop grasping, when you stop demanding guarantees, something opens up. You begin to move with life instead of against it. This shows up even in small ways. Think about creativity. How many times have you tried to write something brilliant and ended up stuck? But then you go for a walk, or take a shower, or simply stop trying and suddenly the idea comes. That's letting go. Or think about a time when you were trying desperately to fall asleep. The harder you tried, the more awake you became. But when you finally gave up, you drifted off. That's letting go. What's ashtray metaphor is funny because it's so real. You can't throw something if you won't let go of it. Yet we live like this all the time, gripping our plans, our identities, our expectations, our fears without realizing that our real power lies in release. Even in moments of crisis, letting go can be transformative. When people hit rock bottom after a breakup, a layoff, a diagnosis, they often discover a strange kind of peace. Why? Because they've lost the illusion of control. They stop pretending. They start listening. They begin to rebuild, not from a place of strategy, but from truth. What matters becomes clearer. The noise dies down. That moment, painful as it may be, is a kind of awakening. And in a broader cultural sense, our unwillingness to let go creates collective dysfunction. Our politics become gridlocked because no one will surrender power. Our economy becomes brittle because companies try to control markets instead of adapting. Our mental health crisis deepens because we keep telling people to fix themselves instead of letting them feel what they feel. The root problem isn't lack of control, it's our addiction to it. Watts didn't romanticize chaos. He didn't suggest we abandon all plans or systems. But he understood that life is a dance, not a spreadsheet. It requires rhythm, flexibility, grace. You can't choreograph every step. Sometimes you just have to move. Sometimes you just have to trust. And trust, at its core, is the willingness to let go. We trust a chair to hold our weight when we sit down. We trust a friend when we share our secrets. We trust the sun to rise in the morning. You'll find your way. So much of our anxiety, our burnout, our exhaustion comes not from doing too much, but from trying to control too much. We want guarantees. We want assurances. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. It never will. Letting go, then, is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. It's breathing through uncertainty. It's pausing before reacting. It's loosening your grip on the idea that things must unfold a certain way. It's recognizing that control is often the enemy of joy. And here's the irony. When you let go, you often find what you were trying so hard to grasp. Peace, clarity, connection, they come not through force, but through flow. You don't chase them. You allow them. You create space for them. To live, you must let go. It's simple, but it's not easy. It requires courage. It requires humility. But it also offers something rare and precious in our hyper-managed world. Freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or effort, but freedom from fear. Freedom to move, to speak, to create, to love. Freedom to be human. And in the end, maybe that's the only freedom that really matters. Alan Watts' philosophy reaches its most powerful point when he argues that a life without a conventional purpose isn't a wasted life, it's a deeply awakened one. We're told from a young age that success means setting objectives and crushing them. That meaning comes from having a mission. That productivity equals worth. Watts pushes back against all of it. He says, stop, sit still, listen to what's underneath the noise. Maybe life is not about moving towards something. Maybe it's about being in something right now. This is not about quitting or giving up. It's not about apathy or indifference. To live without external purpose is not to drift through life like a leaf in the wind. It's about reconnecting with a more intrinsic rhythm, a deeper current that doesn't always show up in calendar invites or performance reviews. Watts doesn't say we shouldn't do anything. He says we should stop doing everything just because we've been told to. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about awakening to the idea that meaning doesn't need a spreadsheet. It doesn't require a mission statement. Sometimes the most meaningful life is the one that simply is. One of the most profound analogies Watts gives is music. He says life is like music. If the whole point of music were to get to the end, the fastest band would be the best. But nobody listens to Beethoven or Coltrane just to get to the last note. We listen because every note, every moment is the point. Music is not about arrival. It's about presence. Dancing is the same. We don't dance to arrive at a destination on the floor. We dance to dance. Apply this logic to life, and it flips everything. We spend our days racing toward promotions, relationships, retirement, accolades, constantly chasing the next goal. We build ladders and climb them. But when we get to the top, we often realize we were climbing the wrong wall. The joy was supposed to be in the climbing itself, but we were too focused on the summit to notice the view. Watts urges us to look around, to slow down, to realize the beauty of a purposeless moment. This doesn't mean ambition is bad or that planning is wrong. It means that only living for those things can make you miss the miracle of right now. And by the time your head hits the pillow, you're still not satisfied. Why? Because you weren't really present for any of it. You were always reaching for something else, something next. Watts invites us into a state of being that many modern people have forgotten, what some would call flow, or presence, or mindfulness, but what he simply calls living. It's the space where we stop striving and start sensing, where we stop optimizing and start feeling. You're not doing nothing. You're fully alive. You're tasting the tea, not rushing through it. You're laughing at the absurdity of life without needing to explain it. You're writing a line of code, not for a deadline, but because the logic of it feels like poetry. You're walking not to hit your step count, but to feel your feet on the ground. There are real-life stories everywhere that mirror this philosophy. Or think about someone who spent years chasing a promotion, got it, and within months felt empty again. The dopamine hit fades. The search for what's next begins again. The cycle never ends. But then contrast that with the person who tends their garden with no intention of selling vegetables. Or the person who volunteers not to pad their resume, but because they like helping. Or the kid who builds a fort out of couch cushions just because it's fun. Those moments don't feed a portfolio, but they feed the soul. They are, as Watts would say, truly alive. You don't have to force life into a blueprint. You can let it reveal itself to you. That's what it means to awaken. To realize that all you're chasing was based on a belief that life had to be something more. But what if this is already it? What if it's enough? In our culture, even finding your purpose has become a kind of consumer product. We buy books about it. We attend seminars. We take personality tests and career assessments. We scroll through YouTube videos titled How to Find Your Why. But what if you don't need a why? What if being here now is the point? What if there's nothing wrong with not knowing, with wandering, with trying things just because they interest you? Watts doesn't say you should reject structure or avoid goals entirely. Rather, he suggests we hold our goals loosely, that we live not from compulsion, but from curiosity, that we stay open to the moment instead of constantly rehearsing the future. This is what makes life vibrant. It's what makes it art. There's a quiet courage in letting go of purpose, at least as the world defines it. Because without external markers, you have to define success for yourself. You have to listen to your inner compass. That can be terrifying, but it can also be liberating. You get to write your own narrative. You get to stop living as a character in someone else's story, but about being fully where you are. You don't have to wait for retirement, for validation, for permission. You can live like that now. It's a shift that takes practice. It's not easy to unlearn decades of conditioning, but small steps matter. Let yourself do something today just because it feels good. Say no to something that doesn't resonate, even if it looks impressive. Take a walk with no destination. Write something that no one will read. Dance alone in your living room. These are not wastes of time. They are acts of reclamation. In a world obsessed with significance, choosing to live without purpose is a radical act of faith. Faith that life itself is enough, that you are enough, but as a song to hear, not as a race to win, but as a canvas to explore. The point isn't to do nothing. The point is to let your actions rise from a place of freedom, not fear. That kind of living is rare. It's quiet. It doesn't trend. It won't make headlines. But it leaves a mark in ways we don't always measure in laughter, in peace, in presence, in love. And maybe, in the end, that's the most meaningful life of all. So here we are. We've wandered through waves and words, through silence and sound, through Alan Watts' strange and beautiful world of paradox where life's deepest wisdom often hides in what looks, at first glance, like nonsense. And maybe now, as you sit with what you've heard, a question is still lingering inside you. If I'm not chasing a purpose, what am I doing? And here's the quiet answer. You're being, not preparing, not positioning, not performing, just being. And maybe, just maybe that's the point. Because the truth is, you're not a machine. You're not a brand. You're not a self-improvement project with quarterly metrics and an upgrade cycle. You're a human being, a wave in the ocean, a blink of the universe becoming conscious of itself, if only for a moment. And in that moment, maybe your greatest gift isn't what you produce, but how you pay attention, how you laugh, how you walk without hurrying, how you listen, how you dance without asking why. Maybe the purpose of life was never to conquer it, but to feel it, to let it move through you like a melody, to touch others like a breeze through trees, to be fully present in the absurd, hilarious, messy, and astonishing experience of being alive without needing to explain it. So what do you do next? Now that we've come to the end, you could, of course, go back to the old chase, the endless striving for a better resume, a bigger paycheck, a shinier purpose. Or you could pause, breathe, look around and realize you're already enough. You always were. And maybe tonight you'll walk slower. Maybe you'll laugh a little louder. Maybe you'll skip the to-do list and watch the moon instead. Not because it's productive, but because it's beautiful. And beauty, dear friend, is enough. If this video brought you something, a shift, a breath, a strange sense of peace, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel. And so together, you can click the super thanks button below. Your donations keep this channel alive, ad-free, and deeply independent. Until next time, let's remember, we'll see you in the next video. And until then, keep walking, keep wondering, and keep letting go.